All right, guys, I'm going to do a little bit on perfect competition. So I can't use the technology here; it's not working for whatever reason. So I'm going to do a little bit of just drawing up on the board, and I have the PowerPoint open, so I'm going to kind of be on and off screen here, but you can see it up there on the board, hopefully. And if you go into the PowerPoint, you just open her up and look her up. Right? So, what are some characteristics of a perfectly competitive system? Or perfect competition, right? We got an infinite number of buyers and sellers. We have homogeneous product. We have what we call perfect information, that is buyer and seller both have equal access and amount of information, and no barriers. So what does this mean? Infinite buyers and sellers, that means that this makes them a price taker, okay? So I know a lot of you have agriculture and various farms and stuff and dairy. Well, all of these are probably as close as you're going to get to perfect competition. My dad has a wheat farm. He sells hay, he sells different stuff, right? The problem that these competitors, perfect competitors, face is they can never differentiate themselves from somebody else. So what we used to do is I would drive the wheat in to the silo, to the, what do they call it, wheat depository or whatever, on the railroad tracks, right? And the grain bin. And they would weigh the truck, and they would test it to see what the quality of the wheat is, and they would give it a grade, and and then they'd open up the newspaper, and the price is X amount today, and my dad said, no, I don't really like that price. They'd say, well, you know what, that's the price. You are a price taker, there's nothing you can do about it. What you can do is we can store it for you. We will hold in a grain bin around the corner, and we'll charge you like a penny a bushel a month, and you can just call us up, tell us when you want to sell, when the price is good for you. But the farmer is subject to the marketplace. And that's why every market, your wheat market, it looks like this, right? Something like this, right? So this is what the market looks like. But to the individual farmer, he has this flat demand curve, because no matter how much he produces, it doesn't really matter. He just takes the market price. Now, what this on the good side is he could produce an infinite, not actually, but he could produce a huge bumper crop, and if it's only him, it would have no effect on the price that he gets, right? It's not like in a monopoly, if Apple produces a mass amount of iPhones, they have to lower the price to sell them all. Well, if the farmer produces a huge amount of apples, then it doesn't really matter. The market is going to pay him the same amount if he produces one apple or a billion apples, right? Now, on the marketplace, if he's a big enough farmer, he might have an effect on the market itself, we could say, but that's not what the theory says, right? He would have to be a big enough farmer. But in this case, he's not. He's just average Joe. Nobody knows who he is. Nobody cares, right? So we take it in, and they would tell us, this is what the price is today, and we can take it or leave it. But the thing is that the sellers also, not only the sellers, but the buyers of the product, there's an infinite number, and you could say that if the grain says, you know what, we don't really like you, we're gonna shaft you on the price, well, he could drive down the street and sell it to him. Now, I know that that's not very accurate either, because there's usually small towns mean one guy, one grain bin, right? But the other thing is perfect information. Oh, let me get back to homogeneous product. Wheat is wheat, right? Nobody cares who's it from. Oh, this guy down the road, he's got this brilliant system that he grows wheat with. And like, so who cares? I just put wheat in my bread. I grind it into a fine flour, and I put it in my bread. All I care about is it's whole wheat, right? So all wheat's the same, all apples, all Fuji apples are the same, right? What's your favorite apple? Yeah, Fuji apple's my favorite. So Red Delicious, something like that. But what's the Red Delicious? It's a Red Delicious. They're all the same. Okay. Perfect information. The buyer and the seller have access to the newspaper. They have access to how much that. And again, if my dad takes it down, he says, I don't like that price. I think the price is going to go up. both the buyer and the seller have the information. Now, you could say, well, they're going to interpret it differently, but, right? And no barriers to entry. So you want to be a farmer, you just got to go buy the land. It's not, the idea of no barriers, it's not like Boeing, where you have to develop an airplane, you got to develop an entire massive factory, you got to do all these huge amounts of money to go put it in. I directed to Seinfeld. Watch the Seinfeld clip on that, and how the guy, the Pakistani guy, he starts out as a Pakistani restaurant, no, sorry, as a deli. Seinfeld comes in and says, hey, you should be a Pakistani restaurant. So he just borrows a little money, changes it, no problem, right? You know, borrow money, but there's no major barrier. You could open a restaurant, and once you open the restaurant, you can kind of serve whatever food you want. So, you know, there are no perfectly competitive firms out there in the real world, but it's just a theory. And maybe in later one, I'll talk about why this is so, the Austrian idea, why this is so screwy, because if you're a bureaucrat, you might think, oh, everybody should be like a perfectly competitive firm where the consumer maximizes his surplus and the producers sell everything at no profit. And that's the thing. So the demand curve is here. We're going to talk about marginal cost curve. Demand curve is the marginal revenue is the price. It's the price per bushel, right? So they sell another bushel, the marginal revenue does not change. It's constant. And the marginal cost curve, though, to produce more bushels, theoretically it's going to look like this, right? So by the way, the supply curve of the perfectly competitive firm is this thing right here. So as the market shifts in demand will cause this demand curve shift up for the individual farmer, and you go, oh, you know what, a higher price, I'm going to produce more. So this might be a little clearer hopefully in the textbook, but this is the supply curve, just so you know. The supply curve of the individual firm is the marginal cost curve above the demand curve, right, or equal. So as the demand shifts, you'll see that different supply points, okay? So, no barriers. So again, this is the basic idea of the perfectly competitive firm. Price taker. So he is a price taker. He has no control over the price. We'll talk about that. So, because the perfectly competitive firm is a price taker and he has no control over the price, he determines how much he's going to make, again, by his cost. Okay? So he doesn't want to produce here when the demand is here. He's going to lose money, right? Remember, where do you produce? If you are a producer, you always produce at one point. That is where the marginal cost equals marginal revenue, right? So if this is his marginal revenue curve, he's always going to produce where the marginal cost crosses the marginal revenue curve. So, you know, that's the basis of his supply, is his cost. So, skipping through, how much did the competitor produce? Well, again, he wants to make a profit. Now, theoretically, the perfectly competitor in the long run makes no profit at all. And again, economic profit, so no economic profit in the long run. In the short run, he could make losses, and if a perfectly competitive firm loses money in the short run, theoretically he goes out of business, right? He just stops producing. So if you're a farmer and it costs you, you know, $5 a bushel to produce wheat, and you're selling it for $4, you're probably not going to produce it, or at least you're not going to sell it until you think you can get a better price for it. You know, what you see is what you typically see is that a lot of farmers are seeing their opportunity costs for the product that they have are pretty high, and so they sell off, right? And that's happening quite a bit. But in the short run, you're going to see exiting and entry and exit into the market of whatever it happens to be. So the example the PowerPoints have is the car dealership. Now the car dealership is sort of a monopoly in a certain area, so I don't really think it's a great example, but it is pretty competitive, right? So, you know, if you're a Ford dealer, you're going to compete with Ford dealers in the city next door and all that, and if you can't make a profit, you tend to go out of business, right? Restaurants are